I've had the fortune of listening to so many conversations from so many organizations and seeing the insight of analyzing that using AI and the like. Discovery is where revenue is most won and lost, right? There can be a lot of focus on both the top, the start of the funnel and the end of the funnel, everything from prospecting to negotiation. All of that is key, but revenue is won and lost in discovery conversations.
And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin Beales. Kevin is founder of MySalesCoach. He's got a background in a variety of things in helping salespeople get better. And that's what we want to talk about, how sales has evolved and how we can help salespeople get better. So, Kevin, firstly then, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Excited.
Yeah, no, I'm excited because I know it is something that you are. I always, the word passionate, when people say, oh, I'm passionate about this, passionate about that. I actually know you are passionate about helping salespeople. So could you just give us a bit of the background on what you've done to get to this point? Because I think it is relevant to our conversation in this case.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I genuinely would say we use the word mission here. It does feel like a mission in terms of, as you say, helping sales professionals become better and achieve their potential. So yeah, I started, I'm sure many of the people listening started my life in sales, became a manager and leader, was probably good at some things and was probably not very good at others, and went through that journey and a little bit frustrated, which then when I then became a founder, I became a founder of a business that looked to address that. And one of my frustrations as a manager and a leader was how hard it was to help and coach conversations and sales conversations, sitting alongside people on calls and demos, trying to give them feedback, coaching afterwards when maybe both people had a slightly different perspective of the call, a slightly different memory of the call. And it just felt a really frustrating experience. Not all the calls and conversations were the best calls and conversations to join. So I founded a company called Refract about 10 years ago now, where we captured the calls, conversations, demos, everything from phone calls to Zoom and team conversations, that automatically profiled the key coachable moments of calls and conversations. So it would profile, this is where there was this objection, this is where a competitor was mentioned, this is where there is a pricing conversation, this is how many questions people ask on a call, this is how much people talk on a call, but surfacing primarily those key coachable moments so that managers and leaders could jump straight to those moments and help their teams in those critical moments where revenue is won and lost in conversations. So was fortunate to do that for almost a decade, analyzed literally millions of conversations across hundreds of organizations from different sizes and sectors. But in truth, was still left frustrated because as a product, as a business, we had to pivot a lot away because there was one problem we could never solve, which was the time that managers had to help and coach their teams. Managers, and again, I'm sure your audience will really connect with this, that are tasked with a whole laundry list of responsibilities and tasks of recruiting and onboarding and forecasting, managing up, managing down, having to manage underperformance, all of the things on a day-to-day basis that managers are tasked with. And unfortunately, nearly all of those are far more time critical than coaching. Coaching can always wait till tomorrow, and invariably does. I think there's a great stat that managers and leaders typically spend 5% of their time coaching by their own admittance. And actually, when you ask teams how much coaching they get, it's a fraction of that 5%. Yeah, after going through that time at Refract with that as our kind of passion and mission, left feeling slightly frustrated. The business got acquired, stayed with the company for a couple of years after, and built fortunately a successful business, but had to make it a lot more automated in terms of some of the value that came out of things that happened in that black box of conversations across teams and sales reps. So that led me at the start of this year with my co-founder Mark to found MySalesCoach, which is really where we help provide that additional support of expert coaching as a service, as a subscription service to sales teams and managers that, as I say, got born out of never really feeling like we solved the problem that we set out to solve.
Oh, brilliant. That's very cool. It sounds in my head. I have to build analogies for myself. It's like giving the sports professional the highlight clips, the show reel of the things that have gone on. Things did really well. Things could have done a bit better, but nobody really looking at it or doing anything about it. So
And
all that effort for nothing to then come and then go back and do exactly the same thing in the game the next week.
exactly. And that, yeah, that is the ultimate frustration, as you say, that no one more passionately knows and believes and has seen the impact of a leader and managers coaching those calls and conversations, even peers coaching those calls and conversations, even individuals self-reflecting on those calls and conversations. That is where revenue is won and lost in those moments. But as you say, the frustration of then seeing all those gold moments and highlight reels that then get untouched, and never really have the impact that they could have, because of the genuine challenges that we all have on our times and the priorities that we're juggling, did leave me really quite frustrated, and frustrated that in truth never solved, hopefully until my sales coach, the problem that was the passion and mission that we set out to solve.
Brilliant. We could talk about coaching, and we'll probably touch on it at the end very easily. But Mark's already done that. I've already talked to Mark. He's stolen all your thunder on this one a couple of months ago. We'll drop it. We'll drop it. Is that normal? But no, but you're aligned. You're aligned. That's why.
Absolutely, yeah.
We could drop a link to that. You've used a really interesting expression twice. You talked about where revenue is won and lost in the conversation. I'm like, oh, okay. And you also said you've got millions of calls now of data that you looked at. I'd love if you could share a couple of the areas that you've identified where you go, this is a biggie that people get wrong, or this is another thing which if people do this, they could get right. That would be brilliant stuff.
Yeah, let me give you maybe three parts to that answer. So I think the first thing is every call and conversation is littered with moments for opportunities to learn and improve. Doesn't matter whether it's top performers or those that are struggling. There are some might be quite subtle, a slightly different way of phrasing that question, a slightly different positioning in how that's presented. And some might be absolutely fundamental, that those moments that turn your stomach as a manager and a leader, and there will be, and this is where, as I say, so much in our profession happens behind closed doors, and we just don't get to hear perhaps the things that people say on a frequent basis that they take as part of their even informal script. I think we all revert to a lot of the same answers, a lot of the same terminology when we're in those situations that can sometimes be stomach churning for a manager or leader to actually hear, and then to know that perhaps that is repeated not only across countless conversations, but maybe even across a whole organization, and has never been addressed or even surfaced. I think, though, coming to your question, without doubt, and I say this as I'm sure there's probably not a lot of people on the planet that have had the fortune of listening to so many conversations from so many organizations and seen the insight of analyzing that using AI and the like. Discovery is where revenue is most won and lost, right? There can be a lot of focus on both the top, the start of the funnel and the end of the funnel, everything from prospecting to negotiation. All of that is key, but revenue is won and lost in discovery conversations. And again, countless conversations where you can see in that discovery conversation, you can predict the outcome, even if that outcome in a complex sale isn't going to come for another 6 months. You can predict the outcome by what is and what isn't being said in discovery conversations. And that is where the greatest value and the greatest return on investment for a manager or leader comes, is in that discovery phase.
Wow. Are you sure about that? No, you didn't sound quite certain enough. That is the thing.
I'm definitely saying, as I say, it's not to say that there's not huge values in other parts. And I guess in some ways, sometimes it's easier to focus on other parts when you're talking about a negotiation or a pricing conversation. And those levers are obviously big and can have a big impact on on end results and a big impact on the amount of revenue that individuals create. But the actual success of an individual and whether they are a top performer or otherwise, yeah, definitely comes down to what happens in that middle phase, in that discovery phase.
Yeah. And when we say predicting the outcome, we're saying you could just strip that bit out, we could listen to it, and we could go, that ain't going anywhere, or that is likely to move on at pace, or that's going to be hard, but I think they'll still have legs in it. Is that what we're saying? We could almost just take that piece out and know what's going to happen purely on that.
You get the benefit of being unemotional when you're listening to it. You're not emotionally invested. You're not there in the moment, and therefore you don't get stuck with having happy ears and just going along with the flow. So being able to then listen to conversations where you can hear that there is a prospect, an individual, an organization that is showing interest, but you can spot those signs that there isn't enough motivation to buy. There isn't enough pain. There isn't enough value. There is perhaps people that are going to be intrinsic to whether this organization becomes a customer or not that just aren't involved in the conversation. It's much easier, in fairness, it's much easier when you're dispassionately listening to this in your own time, not there in the moment, thinking about what are you going to ask next? Where is this conversation going next? Trying to predict everything. And as I say, living in that moment and preparing for that next question, to be able to dispassionately, unemotionally listen to what's being said, listen to what's not being said, and see all of the signs of something that will revert in no decision, ghosting, or all of those things become very predictable when you listen to discovery conversations.
Brilliant. And I guess the other thing you could say is that this is so important when people are involved in the process. There has to be. So if people aren't involved in the process, how good's your copy or how good's your offer or whatever. But you're saying as soon as people are involved, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the conversation is really starting to happen. It's going deeper. And so that's the bit we have to get right. Otherwise,
Exactly.
What's the point? You don't need anyone.
Exactly. And and again, across countless teams, and I've been there and I've done this and made this error myself, as a manager or leader, where do you focus most of your time and attention in those, whether you call them the one-to-ones or call it coaching, is you're talking about pipeline. You're talking about, because obviously everyone's there. We're all sitting there with whether we're individual contributors, whether we're managers and leaders, we're looking at the month, the quarter, we're looking at the forecast. And so you're looking at the end of the year. You're spending a disproportionate amount of time in the latter stages of those hot prospects and opportunities, where actually the biggest lever for improvement, the biggest lever for impacting on revenue is in those discovery conversations. I think, maybe even following on from that, Fred, because again, I'm sure this will be interesting to a lot of the listeners of your podcast, is also that a disproportionate amount of time can often be spent on the individuals that are perhaps struggling, slightly behind in that kind of coach up or coach out moment. And again, that's obviously really important. But some studies that show the biggest revenue impact comes from the middle performers, that middle 60%, who are middle performers for a reason. They're middle performers because others are selling more and are selling more successfully than them. There is that significant room for them to grow, and they make up a disproportionate amount of the sales population. That's where the biggest bang for your buck in terms of ROI from time and coaching with the team comes from those middle performers.
Yeah, I read that study. It's just been around a little while, hasn't it?
It has, it's definitely not a new study.
And if I remember well, with that, what it says is that a lot of managers, again, are time poor. We've said that already, which is why study pipeline. Why? Because you can send me that data. I can just look at the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So if they are putting some time in, you're inclined to go, let's help the people that are worst. Let's try and drag them right up. And then the top performers, they demand stuff anyway, don't they? They want help. They get that help will help them get better. And
Yeah,
they ask.
exactly.
They ain't shy.
Yeah, exactly. They're the people that are perhaps demanding
Yeah.
that time and that coaching more. And as I say, that middle pack can often be they're doing okay. They might be they might be in and around hitting quota, and therefore there's no drama, there's nothing on fire. They don't get as much time and attention, as you say, as those that are either struggling or those that are demanding that time and attention. But that's where the biggest revenue ROI comes from.
So if we're thinking about the discovery calls, then also the sales meetings, and people call these things a bunch of different things, but yeah, it's the conversations you're having with clients or prospects or potential customers early on. Let's go tactical. People like the tactical stuff on this, don't they? Yeah. What are some of the things then that the research or your studies, would you call it research, study, practical definition? I don't know what you'd call it because it's real.
The benefit, there's two types of data, I guess, here that I can share. The data from analyzing those conversations at scale, and then the more personal, what have I seen in countless organizations in those calls and conversations. I think some of the most obvious ones are that is not digging deep enough, that there is some discovery of pain, there is some discovery of value, and it's almost like those boxes have been ticked. Yes, I can see that they're not happy with their current vendor. This is a problem for them today. If they solve this, would help them achieve X. And it's surface level pain that ticks the boxes of we've discovered pain and value. It's created enough excitement in the prospect that conversation has the oxygen, has the excitement to carry on, but is still missed the opportunity, and to a degree the moment, and I'll perhaps come back to that in a second, where I think I've used an analogy really of it's like an archaeological dig that, I think actually Mark uses a really good analogy of digging for treasure, and your salespeople, and apologies if he's already used this on your podcast and stolen my thunder again, but
he learns it from you, right?
we'll arm wrestle over that one. But that digging for treasure, and it's literally you hear a salesperson put their spade in the ground and hear a thud, and then they stop. And I know there's something here, I know there's treasure here, but they miss the opportunity to dig deeper, to work out how big that box is, to work out what's in that box by asking the deeper questions, maybe even the harder questions of understanding why this is a problem, who cares about this problem, what are the personal motivations for someone of solving this problem, is it really going to be a priority for them, all of the questions that just go much deeper in terms of really helping maybe someone realize beyond that moment just why actually this might be an even bigger problem than they currently think. This might be affecting and have more long-term impact than they were actually giving credit for. This affects other people in the organization that you don't have a relationship with, and aren't necessarily going to build that relationship without having that understanding. It's that going deeper in those key moments. And the reason I just mentioned that it's at that moment is I think one of the great things about recording calls and conversations, one of that great things about self-reflection is you can always go back, and it's pretty easy to go back. So being able to perhaps reflect on that and think, okay, they told me this, they told me that, but I don't really know how much of a problem this is. I don't really know who else cares about this problem. I don't really know why this matters to this individual, or what the personal repercussions would or wouldn't be. Is to go back to that in further parts of the conversation, having that reflection of, look, just before we go into this next call, I just want to replay a couple of things that I heard last time and a couple of questions when I've reflected on that. It's really actually quite easy to go back to that, and powerful, because you then really get to think about what are the ways that I can best dig deeper here? What are perhaps the harder, more uncomfortable questions that I can ask that will really help me appreciate and the prospect appreciate is this ultimately something that there's going to be a budget created for, and there's going to be enough urgency created for, or not?
Yeah. Well, it is powerful, isn't it? And it's not too late. It's not too late, because just going and saying, I've been thinking about something that you said, and working out how you might be able to do something about this. What a brilliant line. You care about me enough to be thinking about me when we're not on a sales call.
Exactly.
Awesome. Love it.
And I feel heard, right? Because you'll be playing the words that you heard. And as I say, now you get the power of, I haven't got to think of a question just there and then in that moment, which can often be hard. Yeah, how many times do we come off a call and we're like, oh, I should have asked them that? You get that ability to go back. Probably slightly deviating, but just while it's on my mind, I think one of the most powerful things that I've seen used at that time is being able to use the line, can I ask you a difficult question? And that, which I've never ever heard anyone say no to, by the way, who says no to that. But all of a sudden, two things happen when you use that line. One is you literally can ask anything. You've gained permission to ask anything, however difficult it is, however uncomfortable it is. And secondly, they're prepared. You haven't hit them. You haven't hit them from the side. You're not going to upset them. You're not going to cause friction in the conversation. You've got permission to literally ask any question you like, however difficult, however uncomfortable at that moment. And that is, yeah, that can be super powerful.
It works quite well with senior people, doesn't it? Because they're like, of course you can. I'm here to answer difficult questions. What I do. It's part of the job. Come on, bring it on.
Definitely. And I think, yeah, as you say, you'll definitely get that willingness. But I think even when you're speaking to someone who isn't maybe quite a senior, what perhaps they're not used to is they're not used to being asked those difficult questions. And actually, therefore, even more reason why you just need to create a bit of a layer of expectation, a little bit of a mutual buy-in to, I can ask you this question. And then again, so even in those instances, I think that can be really important.
Yeah. And even to get the initial response of, oh, I'll have to think about that. Awesome. That is your job as a salesperson, isn't it? Your job is to help people think. If you
Exactly.
think your job is to do a BANT checklist, yeah, and move on. And I think there's something that you said, and I want to replay it. You went, the prospect gets excited. Now, I was going to say, is it the prospect getting excited, or is it the salesperson who's getting excited, going, oh, they said this and this. That means that we can probably sell to them. Happy days. Let's crack on. So I think it's probably two excited parties here, rather
Without
than that
doubt.
calm, let's just take a moment. Let's really get our heads around this. So, yeah, can I ask you a difficult question around it? We're helping each other to think. If you heard that on the discovery call, you're thinking, this is going places. This is going
Exactly.
to come out.
Exactly. And if I bring that to life and give an example, here's a real life example that I'd have heard in the last week. Can I ask you a difficult question? Are you going to lose your job if this doesn't get sorted? Now, at that moment, I know in listening to that conversation, that individual wasn't thinking this problem was at that scale. They knew it was a problem. They knew they had motivate. They knew that it was a problem that they wanted to sort, but they weren't there yet. They weren't asking themselves that question. They just knew it was an important. They just knew it was an important problem. When you're solving the problem, and even if they said possibly not lose my job, but it might hold me back from what happens next in my career, that's still one hell of a motivation to solve, more than this is a problem on my list, which by the way has got a lot of things on my list. My budgets are limited. It's hard to go and ask for money right now, etc., etc., etc. Having that, being able to ask a difficult question, can sometimes create a completely different dynamic in understanding mutually why actually this problem might be even bigger than is being given credit for.
Yeah. And it's funny. I know I keep switching, but is that for the prospect or is that for the salesperson? It's often a difficult question for the salesperson, isn't it? In that I need to get away from all this logical stuff into kind of the more emotional side. Yeah, the stuff that we know really is going to drive stuff forward. That's hard to ask. So I know if you're getting yourself permission to help you do that and you recognize it's an important thing,
Exactly.
again, that's where you're really going to be moving the stuff forward.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
oh, I love that. I love that. Can I ask you a difficult question? Wow. I wrote something down here. I need to get this rewound and study the things. There's a couple of things that I've written down. I've written a lot down to ask the next question. But what is it then? Because I just alluded to it. What is it then that would stop somebody asking those difficult questions?
Number one,
Yeah.
need to be liked.
Okay.
So in some of the data that exists from OMG, Objective Management Group, for any of the audience that are familiar, assessed over 2 million sales individuals. The biggest of all the DNAs that they analyze, the biggest attribute that is so significantly different between top performers and the bottom 50%, right? So we're not just talking about people that are really struggling here. We're just talking about those that are, in their words, maybe some serviceable, some underperformers, is need to be liked. Top performers, very few. I think it's, off the top of my head, I'm going to say it's 14% display a need to be liked. But in that bottom 50%, it's over 80% have that need to be liked. And it comes back to some of the things that people believe about sales, that sales is about building relationships, and of course, important having relationships. But the key is having trust and someone that can help solve the problems. But when you can replay, it's that having relationships, it's having the gift of the gab. They're such an outgoing person. All of those attributes that can be synonymous with sales as a profession, especially externally, come back to building relationships, need to be liked, and people may be finding it difficult to ask those questions. But I think it's also, once you've asked those questions and you've seen how powerful they are, then you can't stop, because you realize how it helps. And to your point, it helps both of us here. It helps us both understand whether this is a problem that really matters and actually what the consequences of this problem are. So yeah, I think need to be liked is right up there.
It's interesting because I think that asking those difficult questions will get you liked, because you will help people get clarity. It'll help them make sense of stuff. And so you're a far more welcome visitor to come and help me get my head around things than somebody who turns up a bit like a website and go, oh, I can get all that stuff myself. It's all very well, you've been a lovely chap, but it's not helping me here. So actually, that's what builds a relationship.
I'd perhaps tweak it slightly and say, again, with the context of saying, can I ask a difficult question? That definitely helps. Imagine you ask that question without that, though. Imagine you just went into, so you're going to get sacked if you don't solve this. That can seem arrogant, bullish, aggressive. Those things don't correlate with need to be liked. And it's probably more, does it get you liked, or does it get you trusted? Does give you the trusted advisor, the experience, you're working together to solve a problem? I think it buys you those things, and it creates those things more than, Kevin, Fred, what a really nice person. Like it's more about being trusted and being revered for your expertise more than it is what a lovely bloke.
Yeah. And things aren't mutually exclusive.
Of course.
And the top performer has got high EQ, haven't they? High emotional intelligence. They've got good interpersonal skills. They know how and when to pitch that question. They've probably got great prep. So they've said something earlier on, which has already indicated that they've got something about them to be able to help with that. So yeah, it's not just purely learn that line and fire it in as fast as you can.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned EQ there as well, because you're absolutely right. It's so hard to quantify, but it is such a thing that really does differentiate those top performers, that in their conversations that they have that high EQ. But again, I think this is where coaching, those calls and conversations and coaching can help. You can't necessarily dial up someone's EQ, but you can help them understand why asking this might be such a powerful question, why phrasing it like this might get you a much better response, why doing that in that tone might not help you get the outcome that you want. You can help people understand you're not asking people to follow a script. You're helping them to understand why something might be really positive, why it might not, and even things like how tone and deliverability and pausing and all of those things are instrumental to EQ.
Yeah. So that is dialing it up, Kevin.
It is, yeah, yeah,
So you can
yeah.
dial it up.
You can. What you can't do is actually, is it easy to actually change someone's emotional intelligence? It's not that easy, but you can help them understand how they can do things that will display more emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I got it. No, you can definitely help people develop it, because it is so much about understanding of self and others, isn't it? So
exactly, yeah.
Oh wow, time has just flown. It really is. I could talk about this stuff all day, but I need to respect your time. So, can I ask you a difficult question?
Go
Actually,
on.
no,
There
this
you
is
go.
quite an easy.
No, that
It's
would have
quite an easy.
just ruined the
It's not
entire
anyway. It's
podcast.
easy. It's an easy question. Where can people get in touch with you? Because you've spoken so much sense here, and I'm sure they want to see more if they can.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So I think probably the easiest is let's connect on LinkedIn. Love to connect with as many people as are listening, and we can create a valuable connection. I'm Kevin Beales. That's Beales on LinkedIn. You can obviously check out at MySalesCoach, and we're fortunate to work with amazing best of breed coaches like yourself, Fred, here at MySalesCoach. But yeah, love to connect with people on LinkedIn. That will be the best way.
We'll pop both those links into show notes so people can just find those straight away and click on there. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming along and sharing some of that hard-earned, hard-researched experience. That's been really insightful. Found it very useful.
And likewise, Fred, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.